Hi, my name is Jason Taylor, and I'm a Cybersecurity Program Analyst at Sedara. And I'm really excited to be here to tell you about our Cybersecurity Development Program, or CDP. At Sedara, we like to think of our services as comprising four pieces of an overall puzzle. Today, we'll be talking about that top left puzzle piece, which is labeled vCISO. That's because in CDP, you'll have a designated virtual Chief Information Security Officer who can work with you to develop your very own cybersecurity program. But we also have other services, including designated penetration testers who are ethical hackers who can test the security of your network or applications. We also have virtual security engineers who can help you to implement a specific technological solution. And we have a security operations center, or a SOC, who can provide 24/7 monitoring of your network. For now, though, in the rest of the presentation, we'll talk about that top left quadrant, which is our CDP program. So what does our program do? Well, we help folks solve three problems. One problem is if folks might not know a lot about cybersecurity. So there could be an education need to learn more about how cybersecurity works and ways to improve your security. The second solution that we offer is to help folks reduce their cybersecurity risk. We can do this by implementing best practice controls to improve your cybersecurity posture. And then the third thing that we can solve for folks is by helping you to become compliant or maintain compliance that you already have. So our unique CDP solution is that we help to educate users, to implement best practice security controls, and to help you to become or maintain compliance. And we do that through designated virtual Chief Information Security Officers who are your expert, trusted advisors. So how do we typically work together to make this happen? Through two ways. One is through a point-in-time gap assessment. We'll talk about what gap assessments are later on in this presentation, but it's basically a 2 to 4 month engagement to determine how your cybersecurity program currently is. We would deliver the results to you, but then it would be up to you to implement the findings. Therefore, we typically like to encourage folks to go for the full CDP engagement. That's where we work together for a whole year. You get your very own designated vCISO. We conduct a gap assessment, and then we work with you on implementing the results hand in hand and step by step. So when we implement the results, we work through our CDP lifecycle. We'll become very familiar with this graphic before the end of the presentation, and this is really how we make everything happen. So we'll start in the very top left on that customer kickoff box. If we started working together with the CDP program, we would get to know one another, set expectations and timelines, and then very quickly jump into conducting a gap assessment. We'll learn more about a gap assessment on the next slide, but it's basically to figure out where your current security posture is. When we uncover what your security posture is, we'll likely find some gaps that we would like to close, and we would document all of those gaps and how to close them in the next box called POAM. That's a plan of action and milestones. The POAM is a detailed workbook that would instruct us how to improve our security posture, and then we could use the findings to work through the rest of the CDP lifecycle by educating you on why that area is important, determining what resources to allocate to implement a specific solution, to then implement that solution, however it might take, whether it's a people, process, or technology problem. And then just as important, we would test and audit the implementation to ensure that it's working with fidelity. Once we do all of that, we go back to the POAM, put a big checkbox that we just accomplished something, and then identify the next action to work on, continuing to cyclically work through this entire life cycle as we improve your cybersecurity posture. So that's our CDP workflow, and we're going to zoom in now on the gap assessment box to learn more. So a gap assessment is a point-in-time assessment in terms of where you are, that's your current state, as compared to where you want to be, that's your target state. We typically determine what your current state is through interviews, document collection and analysis, and by performing some open source intelligence. And then your target state is typically a combination of your own goals, different best practices in the cybersecurity field, and any compliance requirements. You can see on the screen there's a number of different cybersecurity frameworks out there, from NIST CSF to NIST 853 to PCI DSS to StateRAMP, and on and on. There's a lot of them, and they all offer great cybersecurity best practices or may be required for you to follow for your field. And we would typically use those compliance frameworks as a target state. Another way to look at the gap assessment is through this visualization. Your current state we would communicate to you in a report, and then we would also communicate your gaps and how to close them in a plan of action and milestones so you can achieve your target state. So let's look at a gap assessment example against the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. This is one of the most common cybersecurity frameworks out there. And what you see on screen is the version of NIST CSF 2.0 that is slated to be released in early 2024. In the NIST CSF, there's 6 functions, 22 categories, and 106 subcategories, ranging from, as you can see, supply chain management, network security, to detection and logging. It's a whole lot of controls, and that's because there's a lot in the cybersecurity field. There's a lot of topics to cover, a lot of best practices to follow, and we would help you to discern the intent of each control on every framework and to help you to implement solutions to close any gaps. So because there's so many frameworks out there, and because each framework has so many controls, with the NIST CSF there's 106, but other frameworks can have many, many more, hundreds of them, we've identified at Sedara a way to make this process work well. And we communicate all gap assessment findings according to what we call our 13 cybersecurity domains. So regardless of framework, we've identified these 13 areas as areas that any good cybersecurity program will have. So these are logical categories that we would use to help communicate the results to you and your team so they understand how to make immediate actions to improve their cybersecurity posture, and just as important, sustain those improvements over time. But we won't lose whatever compliance framework we are conducting the gap assessment against, because we've mapped every cybersecurity framework's control against these 13 domains. So you are still getting the results of your compliance requirements that you need. Speaking of those results, let's look at a sample gap assessment report. Each report would have essentially 5 sections for each of those 13 domains. There'd be an overview of the domain, a target state for what an organization that successfully does that domain looks like, and then, as I mentioned, those mapped controls to each domain, and then your current state and suggested actions. So for instance, for our identity management and access control domain, here's an example of what might be in a report. You can see that there's the NIST CSF control mappings there if we were doing a NIST CSF gap assessment. And then critically, here's an example of some suggested actions we might have for the identity management and access control domain. These could be anything, because it all depends on where your organization currently is and what your goals and aspirations are, but these are general best practices to do identity management and access control well. So hopefully the gap assessment process makes sense now. It's a process to determine your current state as compared to your target state, and we deliver those results to you in a report. Now, those suggested actions that we just talked about would be put into the POAM, the Plan of Action and Milestones. That's what we'll zoom in to look at next. So the POAM is a workbook, a detailed workbook with all of those suggested actions, and this would be kind of our guiding North Star that we would continually refer back to as we work to improve your cybersecurity program. You can see the types of categories that would be in the POAM. And to use a concrete example, say a finding during the gap assessment was that you don't have an incident response plan, then a suggested action would be to create an incident response plan. But of course, we would lay out all of the best practices that we would like to see in an incident response plan, lay out the milestones, who might own the task, a target date to complete the task, and everything will be always mapped back to a specific compliance framework. So for the NIST CSF, creating an incident response plan would be RSMA1 control, for example. We would continually refer back to this POM as our North Star to determine what to work on next and how to accomplish an objective to close a gap. Which brings us back to our CDP workflow. For the remainder of the presentation now, we'll focus on all of the remaining boxes throughout that cycle, education, all the way through audit. And we accomplish these by leveraging our CDP Cyber Library. This is a repository of best-in-class resources that we've made at Sedara for essentially every and any cybersecurity topic. There's a lot in the cybersecurity field, and we've created resources so that we can jump right in and start making improvements against any possible cybersecurity topic. Those resources typically manifest in two ways. One is they might be an educational resource, say a reference guide or a presentation, so you can learn more about the topic and why it's important and what you can do about it. And those resources also may be implementation resources, say a policy template or a process or even a technological solution that you can implement to make a demonstrable change. So whether or not it's an educational resource or an implementation resource, it could be one of those for any of these topic areas and more that are listed on the screen. This is just a sample of the topic areas that we have best-in-class resources for. So to go with our incident response example again, if you need help with incident response as a topic area, we could jump into our cyber library, pull resources, and get right to work. Let's take a look at a sample resource that we have in the library pertaining to incident response. Here's a reference guide, a 14-page document where you could read and just get everything that you would need to know about why incident response is important and how to make a successful incident response plan, how to form a successful incident response team, how to create response strategies to incidents that might happen throughout your network, and how to document and improve your findings. Everything available right away so we can start making improvements. So that brings us back to our CDP workflow. Hopefully we now have an understanding of how this whole process works. Were we to work together with our virtual chief information security officers, conducting a gap assessment and then cyclically making progress through the rest of our workflow. So that brings us to our conclusion. The CDP program, we offer best-in-class resources to help folks to reduce their cybersecurity risk, to educate you about different cybersecurity topics, and to help you to become compliant or maintain compliance. And we accomplish that by conducting gap assessments for a comparison of your current state against a target state. We track findings in a plan of action and milestones for specifically how you can start to make improvements. And then we help to jump right into making improvements by leveraging resources that we have in our CDP Cyber Library. We're really excited about our CDP program, and we would love to work together. So always feel free to reach out to us at the contact information listed on the screen. And on behalf of Sedara, thanks so much for learning more about our CDP program. We are so excited to share with you.